Hey team, and welcome back to the channel. I know what you must be thinking. Well, Ryan, fancy meeting you here. Where have you been this past month? Yeah. So May was a very busy and kind of complicated month in the cat astrology household. For those of you who don't know, at the end of April, I got news that one of the cats was diagnosed with lymphoma. This cat right here. Yeah. And then about 5 days after that, my grandmother passed away. And so following that, there's just a bunch of travel to help the family for the funeral, for Mother's Day. But oh, your mom's sick, so you have to stay in a hotel room. Mother's Day is canceled. You have to come back later and do it. A niece's birthday. And then finally, Norwalk in Seattle. So throughout the entire month of May, I did not spend one entire weekend at my own home, which made it very difficult to get work done. So I appreciate you all and your kind of patience and understanding while I took that month kind of off to help deal with all that sort of emotional stuff going on. Thankfully, since then, Girly, the kitty cat, she came back. Her diagnosis was a false positive, and she's now doing fine. But there was a period of time where she traveled with us. It was my first time getting to be in a hotel room with an animal, with a pet. That's different. I've never done that before. And speaking of that, the DoubleTree, we got to talk. Did you know that it costs extra to have a cat, to have a pet stay in a hotel room? It cost us. Tell me why. Tell me why Ryan from Texas had to pay an extra $150 that he did not get back for a cat to spend its day wedged in between the headboard and the wall for like 12 hours while we were gone. But freaking George and Stacy from Iowa get to stay in a hotel room down the hall with their three hellions, running up and down the hallways all manner of the night and swinging from sconces and don't have to pay anything extra. Okay, sure. Cat discrimination in my military appreciation month? Cat discrimination in my Pride Month Eve? Get with it. So hopefully with kind of all that out of the way, the rest of the summer can be much calmer. Luckily, the treatment team decided that Girly did not actually have lymphoma. She just had a very serious viral infection, which she's since kind of pulled herself back up from. My grandmother's now at peace after struggling with her own kind of cascading health issues, kind of stemming from a cancer diagnosis from maybe 20 years ago. And her own kind of struggles with mental health issues, shopping addiction, hoarding, things like that. So she's at peace. Norwalk was a blast. Got to have fun at my niece's birthday. So obviously more happy than sad, but still just busy. So I really appreciate everybody's sort of patience and understanding and kind of giving me May to kind of deal with all that, even though you didn't necessarily know about it. But now we are back in the saddle to our regularly scheduled program, and we're going to talk about the election opportunities that we're going to have from our, what is it going on here? From our Gemini New Moon until our Cancer New Moon, so from June 6th until about July 5th. And, unfortunately, there's not a whole lot going on in this month. I was really hoping for a little bit more, like a kind of a nicer announcement into kind of the beginning of summer. And a lot of that's just because a bunch of the planets aren't doing very well right now. Kind of through this period, we have Mercury and Venus go combust, which means we can't use them. Jupiter's in Gemini, and I mean, that's not great necessarily, like, essential dignity, from that standpoint of essential dignity. But we can kind of do the best we can. Our more annoying thing is that Jupiter will be coming to the square of Saturn. Saturn's in Pisces, and then Mars is in Taurus. And so there's just kind of like a lot, it's just not super, it's not a super great time for elections right now. Primarily because the malefics aren't doing very well, so it's hard to lean on them, and we really kind of have to because Venus and Mercury are out of the picture, and then Jupiter will become increasingly out of the picture as we move into the summer, and it moves into Gemini through that square of Saturn. So hopefully, we're going to do the best we can, obviously, but sometimes we're going to come up short. But let's go ahead and dive on into it. Our first electional opportunity is going to be for a 7th Lunar Mansion talisman, and this is going to be something that's only going to be available for Western Europe and Northern Africa. And we're going to have that happen a lot this time. Western Europe, North Africa definitely came out ahead in this sort of talismanic tally. So we're going to see much more focus with them. Australia and North America are going to have much fewer options, but that's just how it goes. Sometimes we win, sometimes we don't. But the 7th Lunar Mansion is a really great mansion when it comes to it's similar to the third lunar mansion in that it has sort of a flexibility to it. The texts describe it as being useful for all good things, kind of secondarily being useful for financial goals. So the third lunar mansion tends to be a little bit more nebulous, I guess, a little bit harder to pin down when it comes to what exactly it's for, other than kind of like its niche subjects of like alchemy and things like that. It's kind of it's under that umbrella of all good things. The seventh lunar mansion also is, but underneath it we see some financial themes come through with it. So the seventh lunar mansion is a really great one to go to for anybody who is wanting, more control of money, more understanding of money, more income streams. Just all, or even, even if not, just because the talisman has sort of like a financial stability or financial growth undercurrent to it, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's all that talisman can do. So if you do need something that's just sort of like generally positive producing, the seventh lunar mansion can fill in that role for you. So keep that in mind as well. And our time for this election is going to be at 10:22 on June 7th. And here we're going to have the moon, kind of deep into the 11th house here in Gemini. And she's going to be applying this sextile to Mars in Aries. And I really like this, especially since Mars is in the 10th house. Here, it's a really strong, really angular Mars. I wish that it had been, like a Mars day or Mars hour, because then we could have maybe actually gotten like a Mars and Aries talisman out of this, which I don't think is something we've really had the opportunity for so far this year. But this connection with Mars, in some senses, Mars isn't necessarily a planet that you would go to for like financial stability, because Mars is kind of about like running through money. In some sense, Mars could be used for like, making money quickly, in a way that hopefully doesn't come across as like grifting. But Mars could be like moving through money quickly, which, like I said, is not necessarily a good thing. Usually we see Mars for people who are kind of spendthrifts, who like make money, but then it just kind of disappears because they spend it really quickly. They burn through it. But Mars is sort of like more focused energy here in Aries, more focused, rambunctious energy, can be useful when it comes to being able to make money quickly. But you're not really going to see that like longevity or that staying power come very naturally to this talisman. So if what I mean by that is like, this isn't a talisman that's going to be very useful for, say, like investing, unless you really put in the effort and the mindset to make it be about that. It can be really great for like making money quickly that you then invest, right? But you're going to have to kind of have that like step one, step two, and they're different, or else I would not be surprised if it kind of goes the same way. It could also be really helpful for like making the money to buy like an expensive thing that you want. You know what I mean? Like if the money's purpose is to be spent on something that you want, then I think this could be a great talisman for that. But any other sort of like financial goal or aim is going to need to be sort of moderated by your own sort of like self-restraint. So if that's something that you're good at, awesome. If it's not something that you're good at, then then you may need to kind of reconfigure your expectations for what this can accomplish. But just kind of finishing up here, the moon has moved past the square. Oh, you know what? We can't do this talisman. I went into all this. Let's see if I can save this talisman. I realized that the ruler of the first house, Leo, is square Saturn. Well, that's a weird square. Is like almost exactly square Saturn, and you don't want that. I just did like a whole lecture at NOAC about like cursed talismans and the elections being bad. And here we go. First one out the gate. Yes! I'm blowing this out of the water. I'm doing so great. Welcome back, Ryan. Do I like Mercury as the ruler of the first house? 11 degrees of the sun, conjunction with Jupiter. Okay, I could see this one working. Just double checking everything. But then the moon. The moon is like exactly sextile this Mars, which is good. So I might try to like push it back to something like this. So let's do something around 1217. We get the ascendant far enough in Virgo to not have to worry about the opposition with Saturn, and then Mercury is far enough away from the sun to not be combust yet. It's conjunct Jupiter, which is a nice little boost, but is also still 11 degrees away from the square with Saturn. So this could be a good option as well. We're gonna shake that one off. We're gonna pick ourselves back up from that catastrophic failure. We're gonna pick ourselves back up. And we're gonna try to move on from that. Our next opportunity is going to be for an 11th Lunar Mansion talisman, and this was something that I was going to say would be available for Western Europe, North Africa, and Australia, But I really dropped the ball when it came to some of these elections because I'm noticing that I picked Leo ascendants for some of them, and we're going to run into that problem of the sun being square Saturn for them. So Western Europe, North Africa will not get an 11th Lunar Mansion talisman, but Australia will still be able to get one. And the 11th Lunar Mansion is a talisman that's primarily utilized, in my opinion, for like career advancement, particularly in like corporate America, kind of climbing the corporate ladder kind of thing. It can also be really useful for negotiations, and since the talisman itself kind of has this intersection of powers between getting favors from authority and financial gain, I really do like to use it for kind of like corporate climbing, for like furthering one's career goals, whether that's like literally going for a promotion and attaining a higher status, whether that's negotiating a better salary for yourself, or like increased benefits, or anything like that. The 11th Lunar Mansion, I think, can be very helpful with. I've used an 11th Lunar Mansion talisman for my husband for many, many years for different career twists and turns. I've always been very happy and pleased with what it's been able to do. So I really recommend this talisman to anybody who is kind of in that situation where they want more, or they want some sort of like career growth to fall into. I've not seen the 11th Lunar Mansion be very successful when it comes to self-employed individuals. And maybe that's just because there hasn't been a whole lot. I haven't gotten a lot of feedback on that, but I know my own experiences. It doesn't work as well for me in my situation, or at least not in such like a clearly, easily attainable goal, like a promotion or like a salary increase are. So the Australian version of this chart is going to take place on June 11th at 1616. And here we're going to have the moon in the 11th Lunar Mansion applying this really nice sextile to the sun in Gemini. So, me, I like sun aspects. I like the moon sun aspects. We've got the waxing moon for increase in gain and growth. We've got cats climbing doors. Let's see what that's about. Cinnamon swirl! Cinnamon swirl! Scream. 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 Don't look at me like I'm dumb. That's right. So we've got that waxing moon phase for increased growth and augmentation. We've got the moon applying a sextile to the sun, which is a planet that's naturally aligned with leadership and authority and honors. So we have a really nice matchup there with the planetary energy. The ruler of the first house is going to be Jupiter here in Gemini. And that's fine. Jupiter's not undergoing anything difficult. Jupiter's not combust anymore. Jupiter's actually a pretty new planet, so that could be another good sort of like starting over, starting fresh, starting in something new kind of energy that Jupiter brings along with it. And Jupiter is far enough away from Saturn to not be, in that square, and the ascendant degree is as well. So all in all, a pretty nice, solid 11th Lunar Mansion talisman to be able to utilize for Australia. Our next electional opportunity is going to be for a Regulus Fixed star talisman, and this is one that I was kind of excited to see just because we haven't had Regulus talismans for a while because of Saturn kind of hanging out in, early mid Pisces, forming kind of that opposition with the moon as she would be here. But now we get a little bit of space from that, and the moon's allowed to make other contacts, so we're able to get more of a purer kind of Regulus energy coming through. Regulus is a fixed star in Leo. It's associated with kingship and honors, and in many ways has some similarities with like the 11th Lunar Mansion, which isn't even like the mansion that it's associated with. So we have that kind of career orientedness. We have that helping to ease symptoms of melancholy, which can be like various mental illnesses like depression, anxiety. It can be chronic fatigue issues with skin, dryness, mobility issues, joints and pain, arthritis. There's like a whole list of symptoms that are associated with abundant melancholy, physical, mental, spiritual symptoms that I would recommend looking into. And Regulus is a really powerful counterbalance to some of these illnesses. So there is sort of like a specific application of health concerns here with Regulus, but primarily we see Regulus in like attaining honors, promotion, career advancement, those kinds of things, being well known in a field. And I guess this is kind of the difference, a big difference between like Regulus versus like the 11th Lunar Mansion. The 11th Lunar Mansion is a little bit more, kind of like I said, I've noticed the 11th Lunar Mansion being much more helpful for people who are in sort of like that classic corporate structure, whereas Regulus is much more about branding and being well known. and hopefully being well liked. So the Regulus is a little bit more pulled towards like people, like individuals who are self-employed, whereas the 11th Lunar Mansion is a little bit more focused on people who are kind of in that classic corporate kind of environment with bosses and higher ups that look kindly on you and can help kind of advance your career. If that's what you're looking for. So this is an opportunity that we have available to North America only. And it takes place on June 11th at 1812. And here we're going to have the moon. Well, first you have Regulus on the midheaven. Regulus is at 0 degrees Virgo now, with the moon applying to the conjunction of that star. And at this moment, the moon is applying this trine to Mars in Taurus. And generally, you'd think Mars in Taurus not a great planet. And I mean, it's not a super awesome planet that you would want involved. There's a reason why we don't make like Mars and Taurus talismans unless we want to like bull in a china shop anything. Just run it over with a tractor, bulldoze it, light it on fire, the whole 9 yards, smash it with a hammer. If it comes in a box, put that box in another box and smash it with a hammer. But that's not really what we're leaning into with this. We're more leaning into the star Regulus, but we like the moon to apply to a planet that's of the nature of that star to help kind of cement it within the physical world. And Regulus is a star that's of the nature of Jupiter and Mars. So the connection with either one of those planets would be ideal. Like that's what we would want. And technically we do have both, because while the moon is immediately applying the trine to Mars in 6 degrees, in 7 degrees, she's also applying the square to Jupiter. So we do have that combination of Mars and Jupiter qualities with this, which I think is very nice, because it's not every day that you get the moon to apply to a planet that's of the nature of the star, let alone like both planets that are of the nature of that star. You don't get that all the time. So Mars is also going to be the ruler of the first house with Scorpio on the ascendant here. And you just kind of run through your checklist of things you would want Mars. You would want to make sure Mars isn't experiencing. Mars isn't combust. Mars isn't square, opposite, or conjunct Saturn. Mars isn't retrograde. Those are kind of the big things you watch out for. Mars isn't in the 12th house as the ruler of the first. So again, just it's a nice surprise of a Regulus talisman after going, I don't know, such a long time. Even back when like, truly we haven't had a good Regulus kind of standard election since, probably Saturn in mid-Leo. So, about 2.5 years now. So it's nice that we're getting to that point where we can have these again. Lucky us, #blessed. So make use of them while we can. Hopefully, it'll be another 7 years before we go through this kind of drought of Regulus talismans, but it'll be here before you know it. The next electional opportunity we're going to have is going to be for Western Europe and North Africa only, and this is going to be for a 16th Lunar Mansion. I could have just looked at the paper, but I decided to try to figure it out in my head. It's going to be for a 16th Lunar Mansion talisman. This is going to take place on June 16th at around 1942. And the... sorry, I just had like a random 1942 fact jump into my head. And the 16th Lunar Mansion is one that is another like kind of financially oriented mansion. So we're kind of falling into this theme now of kind of different ways to make money with the mansions. The 7th Lunar Mansion, arguably the 11th Lunar Mansion kind of as like a secondary thing. And now the 16th Lunar Mansion. And the 16th Lunar Mansion is one that's much more commerce focused. So if you are like working in, sales, if you make money off of commissions, if you work in consulting, if you work one-on-one with clientele, or if you work with like merchandise, buying and selling, kind of maybe things that you make yourself or however that works out for you, the 16th Lunar Mansion can be really helpful in drumming up sales and kind of increasing those numbers off of that. So I really recommend it to people who are at all involved in those fields and want to increase their revenue, the amount of activity that they undergo. But looking at our election here, we've got the moon in the 16th mansion here in the 11th house. She's applying a trine to the sun here in Gemini. And unfortunately, this is just kind of the thing. Like, there's not a whole lot of planets to go to right now. Mercury and Venus are out. Jupiter in Gemini is okay. Mars in Taurus is fine in certain contexts. And Saturn in Pisces is okay sometimes too. So it's like, come on, son, you're gonna have to pick up the pace here. We're counting on you to do what we need to do. Like our one sort of ace in the hole for everything that's going on. So we're going to see a lot of sun contacts. Not that I'm complaining. The ruler of the first house is going to be Jupiter here in Gemini, and that's fine. Jupiter's at least angular in Gemini, not afflicted by Saturn, not combust the sun, not afflicted by Mars. Just kind of chilling out here, doing it, hanging on in a sign it doesn't do all that well in. But essential dignity is not super significant to this. Obviously, we want it. But there are other things that are much more important in that priority list where essential dignity just kind of takes a back seat. Our next electional opportunity is going to be for the 23rd Lunar Mansion. And the 23rd Lunar Mansion, so we passed into the waning moon phase at this point. Now we're into like letting go, reducing, and diminishing. And the 23rd Lunar Mansion is one that is focused on health concerns, on sacrifice, on giving up things. And so melds very well with this sort of waning moon kind of power, which wants to reduce and eliminate. We also want the 23rd Lunar Mansion to help us reduce and eliminate certain things. So I often recommend the 23rd Lunar Mansion for people who are struggling with addiction or bad habits, to people who are struggling with any sort of physical illness, especially if it has to do with like the organs of digestion, just because the 23rd Lunar Mansion does have a very strong sort of digestive kind of emphasis. It's like the luck of the swallower, the auspices of the devourer. So we have that sort of that eating image that's associated with it that we can carry through. So if you're struggling with chronic health issues in your teeth, in your mouth, in your throat, in your esophagus, in your stomach, digestive system, your colon, whatever, then the 23rd Lunar Mansion has some sort of similitude or like very strong connection with those body parts. And I would recommend going to the 23rd Lunar Mansion if that is at all the case that you're experiencing. So the idea with the 23rd Lunar Mansion is like you sacrifice things to it. Pain, discomfort, illness, bad habits, like all of those kind of typical standard positive oriented waning moon activities. The 23rd Lunar Mansion can help us kind of pave the way to overcome or to I don't want to say transmute because I don't really think that's a good word for what the 23rd Lunar Mansion does, but like eliminates, I guess would be the better way to do it. Looking at our election, this takes place on January 24th at 1:52 a.m. for Australia. This is the only location that has this opportunity. And here we're going to have the moon in the 23rd mansion here on the midheaven. And she's going to be applying this trine to Jupiter here in Gemini. Let's see. So we have kind of a long application process here. It's 7 degrees before the moon even gets to, even gets into the sign of Aquarius, and then another 6 degrees before we have that completion of the aspect with Jupiter. So we've got a good amount of like 14 degrees between the moon and Jupiter in this election, which is kind of a bummer. That's not really something that we want, especially when it comes to health stuff. I like it to have fast-acting elections, and the moon being this kind of void or separated from Jupiter is not going to give us a lot of quickness in it. So it's going to be one of those talismans that are probably going to be helpful more like long-term chronically than something that's going to be acute and like, oh, this made me feel better instantly kind of a thing. I doubt you'll see that with this just because of how far this moon is separated, but I believe the moon is actually moving kind of quick. Here, yeah, the moon's moving at almost 14 degrees a day, which is fucking booking it. So we have kind of that, so we kind of change it from like, the moon's aspect is very far. We can expect a big delay to where we add into that like, oh, the moon is actually moving very, very quickly. So we get sort of like a middling thing there. So this void moon is not as big of an issue as it would be if the moon were more middling in speed. And if I kept knocking my camera, if I kept making my camera wiggle, that would be even worse. But it's not as big of a delay as we would expect to see that with the moon moving quickly as well. So we get more of a middling experience, which is great to help us kind of balance that out. The ruler of the first house in this election is Mars in Taurus, and that's why Mars is in the first house in this election. Because if Mars were not the ruler of the first house, I would not let Mars be in the first house. You don't put malefics in the first house in talismanic elections unless they rule the first house. That's Ryhan rule number 47, I guess. I don't know. I need to start numbering them better. And I don't really like Mars and Taurus just because like the lack of essential dignity, but Mars here is doing very well. It's angular, it's not afflicted by a difficult planet, it's not combust the sun, it's not in the 12th house. We don't have a lot of those kind of negative things associated with it. And our final electional opportunity for this lunation, for this Gemini New Moon, is going to be for a 4th Lunar Mansion talisman. So the 4th Lunar Mansion is all about pest control. It's all about destroying or eradicating or removing pests from a location. And what those pests are can vary depending, of course, on your viewpoint. So I guess what I'm saying is this is very much within the realm of like a cursed talisman. It's very much in the realm of a harmful talisman, but it is a harmful talisman that we're trying to laser focus on pests, rodents, infestations that might be on people's homes and property to sort of better leverage this this more difficult energy into something that is not violent per se, and kind of gets a real job done. So I say that to say I use this fourth house. I use fourth Lunar Mansion talismans to like help my garden, get rid of ants. You can use it to make your annoying neighbors move. Yeah, I'm not going to tell you how to use it, but that's an option, kind of a thing. So pests are relative, but we are going to see some very difficult electional placements because this is supposed to be a difficult, uncomfortable, unwelcoming energy to drive things that we don't want in our environment out of our environment. So this is something that's going to be available for all locations, for North America, Western Europe, North Africa, and Australia. And we're going to go ahead and get started with the North American version, which takes place on July 1st at 2:42 in the morning. And I'm writing this down because aphids are getting into my garden now, and I want my zucchinis. So it's either you or me, aphids, and I'm bigger. So taking a look at our election, July 1st at 2:42 a.m., we're going to have the moon in the fourth mansion here on the ascendant, applying this conjunction with Mars and Taurus, all things you wouldn't want with Mars on the ascendant as well. And let's see. So in these kinds of talismans, generally we avoid moon malefic connections. But for the more difficult, for the more like pest control type talismans, we want those malefic, those difficult, uncomfortable energies to come forward as much as we can and directed towards the thing, towards the pest. So that's why we put malefics in the ascendant. That's why we have the moon applied to them. At the same time, we've got Venus down here as the ruler of the first house. So Venus takes over signification of like the pest that we're after. And Venus here, unfortunately, is doing okay. It's not my favorite thing to see. We've got about 8-9 degrees between Venus and the sun, so we're probably outside of that combustion range, which isn't great. I would have liked Venus to be more combust, to kind of show like the oppressiveness of the talisman towards whatever pest we're focusing on. But we don't have that. We've got like this trine to a retrograde Saturn, which is like great, cool. That's not really helpful. But yeah, I would have liked to see some more pain on Venus's part here as a ruler of the first house. But making the best of what we have. The moon is debilitated and the ascendant is debilitated, which is great. Having Venus debilitated as the ruler of the first house, like significantly debilitated, would have been another kind of great kind of cherry on top, a completion of that kind of hat trick of configurations that you would want. The Western Europe and Northern African version is going to be similar. Well, not really similar, I guess. It's going to take place on July 1st at 9:52 a.m. And here we're going to have that moon in the fourth mansion on the midheaven, still applying that conjunction with Mars. So that very angular, that very distinct, that very noticeable, aggressive Mars power, that moon is coming to it to embody it and bring it down. I would have liked to see the ruler of the first house again more afflicted. In earlier charts, I had to throw them away because the sun was in a square aspect with Saturn. But now by this time, we've moved beyond that, and the sun's more moving towards like the trine configuration, which isn't helping me at all with this. So that's fun for Saturn to constantly get in my way and not mess things up when I want it to mess things up, and mess things up when I don't want it to mess things up. Great. Somebody send Saturn his payment because he's doing a great job. So I would have liked to see the sun here more difficult, like going through a worse time. There might be some room here, now that I'm saying this, to push the ascendant degree back a little bit to get it more firmly within like the square aspect of Mars. That would be a great way to kind of balance out the scales and make it more difficult, to make the pest control aspect, the pest repellent aspect of the talisman much more potent and noticeable. So look into that and see how that goes. I mean, I guess I could do it. I'm the one with the camera and the screen recording software and the stuff. But if we push this back, to like 19, so somewhere around like 9:30 a.m. you'd get like a much tighter square with Mars there, which can be good too. You lose a little bit of the angularity, but it's not a huge deal because the next most angular planet's like Jupiter, which is pretty far away. So around 9:30 for Western Europe and Northern Africa to tell those bugs to get. And then our final election, our final version of this for Australia on July 1st at 22:27. We're going to have that moon in the fourth mansion here in the third house, or house of joy. Usually we want the moon on the ascendant or midheaven, but we use the third house in times of dire necessity, in times of dire need. We've got the moon in the fourth mansion here in the third house, and she's applying that conjunction with Mars still. The ruler of the first house is Jupiter down here in, Gemini in the third house, kind of playing a similar kind of situation as Venus was in the North American version. Like, yeah, he's cadent, but he's not combust. He's not in a bad aspect with Saturn or Mars. I would have liked to see a little bit more from here. We're about 9 degrees out from that square of Saturn, which I think is probably still too far to see anything noticeable from it. So I wouldn't really count that as like an affliction. What we do have, though, is we have Saturn on the ascendant here in Pisces. And since Saturn does not rule the first house, since it's not Capricorn or Aquarius on the ascendant, Saturn being in Pisces in the first house is very problematic. So meshes in very well with the energy of the talisman, which is to drive something away, which is to make something not want to be there, which is to help try to get rid of something and kind of, shoo it out the door in a glass jar while trying not to scream and unleash the terror of the spider that's in your home. That's just me, though. Though truly, the fact that I have to actually shoo a spider out of my home is really just a sign that these freeloaders are not doing anything. I don't even want to get started. Don't get me started on these lazy cats. Please don't. Anyway, those are the elections that we have for us for this coming month. I wish there was a little bit more, and I'm looking forward to the summer when we start to get more planets into like essential dignity, or at least out of their essential debilities, except for Mars and Cancer. We're not going to talk about that yet. We'll deal with that problem a little bit later. So I'm hoping to see it pick up more. It's really nice to see Regulus talismans start to come back into play now. I'm hopeful, I need to double check, but I'm hopeful that Saturn's retrograde won't bring it so far back where we'll start to have kind of like that embargo on Regulus talismans. It's been nice to have it, but we're going to start to see an issue kind of now. Saturn moves around and just sort of randomly eliminates sections of the zodiac that we can work with magically. And so like now that we've left Regulus alone, we're going to move into like messing with Alkaid, which is unfortunate because that's another great source of talismanic power. Alkaid's another really great star to work with. So we bob and we weave. We stick and move. We keep it light. We stick and move. But that's all the elections that we have for now. Looking forward to more coming up in the summer that we'll get to play around with. Again, also looking forward to a very calm summer, hopefully, and being able to get more in work and get videos done on time. But thank you all, everybody, for being so patient and understanding while dealing with some of the family stuff. I hope you and yours are well, and I will see you all again on our Cancer New Moon. Oh, no, I won't. I'll see you guys again for whatever the full moon is. What's the full moon? Sagittarius? What's the full moon? The full moon's Cancer. No, Capricorn. The full moon. We'll see you all again on the Capricorn full moon when I learn my astrology and what the new moons are.